Hello, brothers and sisters. Raven here. Today, as I've said, we're going to go into coming into orbit. If you remember, I did do a video on this before, but going through it again, I realized I should redo this and do it in more than one video. This first video is probably going to be a bit shorter than the others because this one I just want to go in and explain the first part of it. It's a 3-part book, and this first part is very short. This is from a message he gives. This is straight from a message by Blair Adams. So this isn't the kind of thing that was written by somebody, or really necessarily even edited by somebody. This was straight from what he preached, and this was fairly recent. This was about 2017 from what I've seen. Kind of shows you a bit of what he's trying to do, and will give you an idea of what to be cautious of. And I'd say the big things are: number 1, mind games. Number 2, hypocrisy. To start off, let's go to his very first sentence of the book. On page 1, he says, "According to King David, the great transgression is the sin of presumption." When I first saw this, I was lost because I'd never heard anybody say something like this before. But let's see how he's going to say this. This passage was in Psalm 19. Psalm 19 says, "Keep back your servant also from presumptuous sins. Let them not have dominion over me. Then I shall be blameless and innocent of great transgression." Two things to point out first. First of all, he didn't say a great transgression. He said the great transgression. Number 2, he didn't say it was a presumptuous sin, but that presumption in and of itself was the sin. That is not what this is talking about. If he was saying what Blair Adams is claiming he's saying, David would have written it as this: "Keep back your servant also from presumption. Let it not have dominion over me." That is what would have been said, not presumptuous sins. This may not seem like much, but it's huge because of what he does. He says a couple pages later this: "Presumption revels in releasing any and all feelings, passions, opinions, ideas, and impulses of the moment. Whatever thought, whatever disrespectful or angry word, whatever sharp-tongued mockery or repartee, whatever action negligent of respect for God's order." God's order. Okay, that's what this comes down to. He's saying any kind of presumption is negligent of respect for God's order. What is this God's order that he's talking about? That's what's going to come up in this book. That's what this is all about, is him trying to tell you what is this great sin to turn away from. You can probably already assume what that is. You can go ahead and do exactly what he tells you not to do. And that's the point. He doesn't want you to let anything you've believed before, assumed before, or even considered as possible before. He doesn't want any of that to be able to make you think what he tells you is wrong. So he doesn't go and say, don't let the presumption define your thinking. Don't let the presumption define the conclusion. No. Nor does he say it's not good to presume. Nor does he say it's wrong to presume. He says it's a great transgression to presume. He's pushing you to the extreme so that nothing is going to block what he's going to tell you. No, it says presumption revels in releasing any and all feelings, passions, opinions, ideas, and impulses of the moment. Okay. That isn't exactly presumption, though. Of the moment would be an assumption. Presumption is something you've already determined beforehand. That has nothing to do with a spur of the moment thing. It's not the way this works. He apparently doesn't even understand what presumption is very well. But then he says, whatever thought, whatever disrespect or angry word, whatever sharp tongue mockery or repartee, whatever action negligent of respect for God's order. Whatever. So no presumption can ever be good. What about his presumptions in this? The hypocrisy of this is extreme. And that's why he does this. He's setting this up so that you're not going to use any of your former thinking. You're not going to let anything you've been taught before have any impact on what he's saying. And he's making it so that if you do, you're going to feel guilt because it's a transgression. That's what this is about. That's his goal in this. That's his motive. After this, he goes and he takes it a bit further. He says it. That is, being in the right community. He doesn't identify this it very well. He leaves it kind of vague. But ultimately, you take what's before this sentence, he's really talking about you being in the right place, being in the right community group. Basically, you being part of Homestead. So this being a part of Homestead or following Homestead, calls in short for a deep awareness of the limitations inherent in our appropriate orbit. Inherent in our appropriate orbit. Okay, what is this appropriate orbit? And why is this so necessary? Shortly after it says this, we try to give people as much room as possible to grow, but we want them to nonetheless stay in their proper orbit around those who are God's primary guides for their lives. So this isn't really about following what God gives you to do. This isn't about following how he guides you, or necessarily what they at other times in this book say is his orbit. It's around those who are God's primary guides. This is all about you have to follow him. You have to follow the leaders of Homestead to have the correct orbit. There's nothing in this as far as letting the Lord decide, letting him push you, guide you. There is so much in what he says after this, and it goes on and on and on. Again, rather vague, no particular place where it really is stated flat out. It just is slowly implied over a long period of him just talking about what he does in his own works and things like that. So all Blair Adams is doing here is just kind of trying to show you, oh, he's got it right. He knows the right way to do it. He is trying to get you to feel this need to keep pushing. He talks about how he's got this task he's got to complete. He's got to finish what he's been given to do. And he's only got so much time in this world to do it. It's like, you've got to get this done. Which is very ironic. There's no talk of waiting on the Lord, hearing from him, and yet it's supposed to be what he has for you to do. Doesn't make sense, does it? But this is what comes out of that whole teaching they have where it's by works. You've got to complete what you got to do. There's these things you have to do. There's something that you need to do in order to earn your salvation or keep your salvation. And what this does is it ultimately points to something he says near the end of this first part. Often the problem is people trying to exert not their own authority in God, but someone else's. And that becomes at best merely a pretense, a sham, whose emptiness and phoniness even a child can see through. People fall into such difficulties precisely because they do not see their own orbit in God. This does not sound like God's teaching. God did not give Israel a king because that was his plan. That was what they insisted they needed. This is not correct. We are under his authority, not any particular man's. There is no pope. There's no king of the church. We follow him. What leaders are supposed to be there are shepherds and servants. Remembering that, that's what's in Scripture. Remember that. And then read this again. He says, that becomes at best merely a pretense, a sham, whose emptiness and phoniness even a child can see through. That's what I see in what he's saying here. But, again, he said to get rid of the presumption because he didn't want you to see this. He didn't want you to notice this. Because you'd look back at what you were told before, what you'd learned before about the Bible, to notice the falsehood of this. And he doesn't want you to look there. So get rid of the presumption. Don't look at the presumption. Go only with what's right here. That's what he's doing. But look at this last sentence one more time. People fall into such difficulties precisely because they do not see their own orbit in God. This goes against so much of what they've been teaching in other places about being rid of self, being part of the community, being one with the body. Now all of a sudden, you have your own orbit in God. Why change it here? Because this is not about you having the right place. This is about you having a place under them. Under Blair Adams. That's what this is about. In this case, he is not within that orbit. He is not within that body in the same sense as you are, because he has been given that orbit above yours. That's what this book comes down to. Okay, that's what you got to keep in mind as we go through this. This is going off a lot of two things I see. New Age and the Old Covenant. This is him trying to put this whole thing of the high priest and the order of the universe to get himself the authority he wants to have in this. That's what this is doing. That's what this is about. Throughout this, it's going to sound like it's about the individual person and finding their point, their purpose, what their goal is, what their place is. But keep in mind, as he gives them these things, as he puts them in their place, remember what it's giving him as a place. So keep that in mind. We'll go into the next part next week, hopefully. But for now, I won't need to let you guys know I am going to be getting rid of my old email address. I've been having trouble with the service. It's been kind of annoying. And I've decided to go to something different just so that I have something more solid and I can feel a little more confident it's going to last. So my new email address is chained ambassador, space mark in between, at yahoo.com. Putting in the description so it's there. So from now on, you can email me there if you want to ask any questions, comment on anything. But the old one in a couple weeks is going to be gone. But it's best if you send to that new address so that I don't miss it. I'll see you guys next time. God bless.